You thought this feeling would go away.
That once they finally noticed you, once the room filled with applause, once the praise poured in, it would quiet that ache inside you.
But instead of joy, you felt hollow. Instead of peace, confusion. Because deep down you were never chasing recognition, you were chasing repair. You wanted the applause to fix something. You wanted to finally feel seen, finally feel real. But here's the quiet truth no one likes to say out loud. Sometimes success feels like failure in disguise. Because when the world celebrates a version of you that isn't fully you, the applause can sound louder than your soul. Alan Watts once said, "Trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth." And he was right, because the moment you start building a version of yourself just to survive, just to be loved, just to be accepted, you slowly begin to lose the person underneath it all. Let's begin. You spent years becoming what they wanted.
You learned to impress. You learned to inspire. You became excellent at making people proud, at making them believe you were strong, stable, whole.
But here's the quiet tragedy. They didn't fall in love with you. They fell in love with the role you played. And when you're alone with your thoughts, that's when it hits.
That strange ache in your chest. Not sadness, not quite emptiness, just that subtle grief of being unseen even while everyone's looking.
They love your smile, but not the cracks beneath it. They love your confidence, but not the trembling it hides. They love your light, but they ignore your shadow. And so you wonder, what happens if I stop performing? What happens if I stop achieving? Would they still stay?
When people admire you for what you do and not for who you are, your nervous system learns survival, not peace.
You don't rest because rest feels like failure. You don't say no because boundaries feel like rejection. You don't cry because tears might ruin the image. You live by an unspoken rule. If I stop being useful, they'll leave. That's how trauma hides in success. That's how wounds wear medals. That's how people with trophies feel worthless at night.
You become addicted to achievement, not because you're greedy, but because it's the only time you feel safe in their love. From the outside, you look unstoppable, motivated, disciplined, admired.
But inside, you're exhausted. You're floating through a life that looks beautiful but doesn't feel like home. You learn to earn worth, not feel it. Maybe when you were young, love had conditions. Praise came when you behaved. Attention came when you succeeded. Safety came when you stayed quiet. So you became the overachiever because being excellent was the only way to feel loved. You became the perfectionist because flaws were punished. You became the helper because pleasing others was the only way to be accepted. But love that must be earned will always leave you empty. Because your soul isn't starving for applause. It's starving for acceptance. To be loved without needing to prove anything.
And until that hunger is fed, no amount of success will ever feel enough.
You fear losing the image more than losing yourself. You work so hard to be respected, admired, valued. But now you're trapped in the very role that made you visible. If you slow down, they'll question you. If you show weakness, they'll gossip. If you stop giving, they might stop calling. So you keep dancing, keep producing, keep smiling through the exhaustion. But deep down, you know, you're not living anymore. You're maintaining. And an image will never hold you when you break. A reputation will never wipe your tears. A spotlight will never know how to love the real you. What you crave isn't fame, it's connection.
You don't want 1,000,000 followers. You want one person who truly gets you.
You don't want recognition. You want rest.
You don't want to impress everyone. You want to be allowed to be imperfect and still be loved.
That's why being celebrated can feel so lonely. Because you're surrounded by eyes, but none of them really see you. The first step out of this prison isn't loud, it's quiet. It starts the moment you whisper to yourself, I'm allowed to exist without performing.
The moment you stop chasing their love and start returning to your own.
Yes, it's terrifying, because the version of you they love isn't the version that's breaking. But the only way back to wholeness is through the silence, through surrender.
Through the pain of being misunderstood on your way to being truly seen. When you're always told you're amazing, when your beauty, talent, or intelligence become your identity, admiration can start to look like love.
But applause doesn't hold you at night. Doesn't listen when you doubt yourself. It doesn't ask how you're really doing. And so it begins, the quiet emptiness behind success. You post a photo. You tell a story, people cheer. But when the lights go out, you're alone with your thoughts.
And you wonder, if they saw the real me, not the curated me, would they still care? Because being celebrated feels like love, but it's not the kind that stays when your voice trembles or your hands shake.
They celebrate what you represent, but few hold space for who you are.
When your worth becomes tied to being impressive, being human starts to feel like a threat.
Every time you succeed, the standard rises. Every time you shine, the world expects more light. And somewhere deep inside, the fear grows. If I stop being impressive, will they stop clapping? So you hustle. Not out of passion, but out of panic. Not for meaning, but for maintenance.
You smile wider. You speak more confidently.
You say what they want to hear. Until one day you realize you've become a character in your own life. A highlight reel of someone who forgot how to just be. Here's the painful paradox. Even when you know the applause is hollow, you still crave it. Because validation is addictive, especially when you're lonely. The comments, the compliments, the attention, they give you a quick hit of meaning. But like sugar, it fades fast and leaves a crash. Alan Watts once said, no one is more dangerously insane than one who is sane all the time.
When you only allow yourself to be one thing, the strong one, the successful one, the funny one, you fracture your soul.
Over time, you begin to resent your own reputation. Because you no longer own it, it owns you. You no longer live your life, you manage your image. The world claps for your victories, but falls silent during your confusion. They want your sparkle, not your shadow. Your confidence, not your questions. So you hide your doubt, your ache, your tiredness, the parts of you that don't inspire. And with every buried truth, you become more alone. Because no one says it out loud. Being celebrated isolates you.
Not because people don't love you, but because they only love the parts that serve them.
You become a lighthouse for others. But no one notices you're running out of light. At some point, you'll look in the mirror and ask, who am I when no one's watching? When I'm not performing, not producing, not pretending?
Can I still love myself when I'm ordinary? When I'm quiet? When I'm not impressive?
If you struggle to answer that, you're not broken. You're awakening. Because true fulfillment doesn't come from being admired. It comes from being known.
And to be known, you must first meet yourself, beyond the spotlight, beyond expectation, beyond performance.
You must love the soft, scared, silent parts of you you've edited out. Those are the parts that need love most.
Until you reclaim them, no amount of success will ever feel safe.
Success is beautiful, but when it becomes armor, it stops being a gift. You wear it to protect your wounds, to prove your worth, to say, I'm okay, look at all I've done. But deep down, a whisper remains. Would they still stay if I had nothing?
That question haunts the celebrated because they've never had the chance to find out.
But there's another way. What if you stopped trying to impress them?
What if you allowed yourself to be ordinary, to be seen in your messiness and still be loved?
That's not weakness. That's freedom.
The more you're celebrated for what doesn't feel like you, the more hollow it becomes.
It's like hearing your name, but not recognizing the person they're clapping for.
Success starts to feel like betrayal, not because it's fake, but because you had to abandon parts of yourself to earn it. This is the quiet grief of the emotionally intelligent, the ones who became what the world needed before they ever discovered who they were.
External validation is a mirror with lag. By the time it reflects who you are, you've already changed.
They're still clapping for your last chapter while you're grieving the parts they'll never know.
They quote your words, but never sat in your silence. They celebrate your strength, but never saw your shaking hands. And so, even when everyone knows your name, you can feel invisible. But maybe this emptiness isn't proof that something's wrong with you. Maybe it's proof that your soul is done settling for shallow love. Maybe this loneliness after success isn't a curse, it's an invitation. Because not everyone will understand your depth, and that's okay.
The ones who truly see you won't just applaud your victories, they'll sit with your shadows.
They'll remember your laughter and your quiet. They'll see your becoming, not your branding. So maybe the real treasure isn't being celebrated. It's being known.
Not by everyone, but by the few who ask, "How are you really?" and stay long enough to hear the truth.
So ask yourself, when was the last time you felt seen? Not for your performance, but for your presence. If the answer feels distant, maybe it's time to let go, not of people, but of the version of you they admire. So you can finally return to the person you miss. That's where wholeness begins. That's where home begins. And maybe, just maybe, that's where you begin again.